Hello everyone, welcome to Scorched Earth Toys at anymoon.com's review of Bandai's SD Infinity VF-25F. This toy was released September 2010 for 4,500 yen. It comes with a dagger, two sets of gripping hands, a gun, a firing effect, a smaller head I will discuss in a little bit, a display stand and connectors for the display stand, as well as some instructions. So the gun has the ability to come apart, and then you take it and you peg in to that slot right there to get it into the Batroid mode position of firing. The firing effect is just a peg that fits right into the barrel of the gun. And then obviously everything just slips into the hand, which you can then remove the hand that is on the toy, which has a little ball joint as you see there, and put in this other hand, which of course fell apart on me. Like so. Alright, so let's take a closer look at how this toy functions. We'll begin with a discussion of articulation. The head is a ball joint. The antennas on the head go in and out, or the guns if you prefer. The shoulders have a transformation mechanism to them that let them come up and down. And there's a ball joint where they connect. So you can pivot that arm pretty much any way you want, except you can't come straight out. You can bring the shoulder at the bicep out about that far there. You have a twist point also right there where the shoulder and bicep meet. You have an elbow joint. It lets you get just past 90 degrees of articulation, but not any better than that. And you saw that the hands are ball joints, so you can spin them around and kind of pivot them back and forth like so. The shield popped off there. I'm not going to really worry about that right now. Going down, there's no waist articulation. Just those are the swing bars the legs are on, which as you can see are swinging freely right now. That's actually a little bit annoying. It'd be nice if they kind of got to a spot and stopped and kind of locked in place. There's not a lot of ability to pivot the legs outward. You can bring them inward. You can bring the legs back, and you'll hit the wings eventually there, and you can bring them all the way forward. There is a swivel point that is just below the intakes, but there's no gearwalk joint, and as you can imagine, that's going to have negative impact on gearwalk mode when we get there. You have your kneecap, which can come down, and then that frees up forward motion of the knee, and you have backward motion of the knee until you reach what was hip kibble in the original design, and it's now hip kibble that's not articulated on this design, so you kind of run into it pretty quick. The foot, the toe opens and closes, obviously that's a fighter mode necessity, but there's a little bit of articulation there, and a little bit of a twist, but not really much. The foot, it's really hard for you to tell, I'm sure, is painted metal, which is nice. This swing bar here is also metal, and it does give a little weight to the toy. The toy obviously is pretty small. It's about 10.5 centimeters tall. So there you go. That is articulation in a nutshell. The wings also don't really lock into place. So between the legs and the hips, or in the wings not really locking into place, the toy is a little sloppy to handle. You can also push back the crotch, and then that can be a little bit annoying as you try to get that back into the proper spot. So while it's neat and there's a bit of articulation there, it can also be a little bit frustrating to handle at any length. I mentioned the toy comes with a display stand. Here it is. Now the display stand itself does have a pivoting top to it and a rotation point there. To attach the Batroid mode toy to the display stand, you lift up the wings, revealing a peg hole. Here is the Batroid adapter that goes into that hole. The wings then pivot back down. Toy goes on the display stand, like so. Alright, if the head is a little too huge and super deformed for you, you can go ahead and replace it with the optional smaller head. The smaller head is only optional for Batroid mode. It's necessary for the other two modes we will be going to. First, I forgot to mention that these head lasers also are articulated. But to swap the head out, you are going to pull up on the head. It'll disconnect. It's on a little swing bar here. So it disconnects, it pulls forward. You want to get it as far forward as you can go. And then you're just going to roll the head back so it pops off the ball joint. Like that. Take your new smaller head, apply it onto that ball joint. And then you're just going to bring it back and pop it into place. You'll hear it click. And now you have the smaller head. Now, one of the benefits, I think, of the smaller head in Batroid mode is a little bit more similarity to the original Joke Machine toy. Which, as you can see, this is pretty similar in size to a Joke Machine, just a little bit smaller, certainly less brawny. The Joke Machine, though, didn't have giant heads. And when you take this and put a more normal looking head on it, it seems to go a little bit better with it. That is kind of my only plus in Batroid mode for the smaller head. I personally prefer, if I'm going super deformed, go way super deformed. Alright, let's continue on to Gearwalk mode. Here we have Gearwalk mode. It's a little bit gimpy. You can easily jostle things. Nothing really locks into position. And the shoulders kind of feel forced in the position they're at because they are right up against the wings. The legs don't lock into position properly. They're kind of just dangling there. You can angle them back and angle the lower leg forward to try to get what looks more like a Gearwalk mode. But it doesn't peg in at the intakes like you would expect from a really high quality toy. But you have to be forgiving. Or maybe you should be forgiving because this is a deformed kind of gimmick toy. So there you have it. That's Gearwalk mode. Again, you have a display stand, so let's check that out. Okay, here we have Gearwalk mode on the stand, and you can see it actually doesn't make a terrible display piece, even though the legs are really not what they ought to be. They aren't really positioned right. I can swing them back a little bit. But you'll never get them really where they ought to be, and that's because if you get them to peg in, the legs will be swept way back. So you're kind of getting towards fighter mode in that instance. So a couple little pet peeves. The connector, which I will show you more on the next mode, it just has a round peg. So while you're handling the toy on the display stand, it can get sloppy on you. Also, I haven't mentioned it, the connector on the shield is the same thing. It's just a round peg. So those items can get jostled a little too easily. If you're a fan of the old school Joke Machine, you will remember that there is a pilot figure in there. Maybe not the best pilot figure, but he's there. When you have a giant canopy, that helps. You don't get a pilot figure with the SD Infinity VF-25. So that is a little bit of an obvious exclusion, although, hey, maybe it just looks like an empty VF-25 sitting in the hangar. It's still super cute, and that's really what it was going for. You can bring the wings all the way out. You can bring the wings that far back. As I pointed out earlier, there's nothing that's really getting those fins into the proper spot. Obviously, there's no removable intake covers that show turbine or anything. It's a pretty small and simple toy. You can attach the gun in fighter mode via a little slot that is in, let's see if I can poke it out for you. That is inside the arm there. You can kind of see it. Fits in easily enough. You just get the handle between the arms. get that pegged where it's supposed to be, and now he's got his little gun firing in fighter mode. So that's pretty sweet. There's a few problems here. One, you don't have landing gears. So you'd have to be just sitting there holding the toy and going pew, 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 and playing with it if you were going to have that gun attached. You would instead obviously want to use the display stand that comes with the toy, but the attachment piece for the display stand uses those same little pegs that we just used to put the gun in. So now you're using your display stand, and that's cool, but you have this giant display stand adapter that's pretty obvious, and it makes it so you can't use the gun. So that's quite a few compromises right there. An option for you, if you're not going to use the firing effect, would be to go ahead and install your gun, and then to use that same adapter you had used in Gearwalk mode, which will put the base of the display stand adapter right in front of the gun. Then you could just put it on like that. So there's your option if you really want to have the gun in fighter mode. That's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to use the display stand, use the Gearwalk adapter, and that is that. There's no real harm in this, so I don't see a huge advantage to using the fighter adapter instead. Are you a fan of SD Macross toys? If so, you probably already own the SD Infinity VF-25F. If not, there's very little here compelling you to go out and get it, especially at the secondary prices that are charged today. It was a one run and done production, so it's pretty limited and kind of hard to come by. And when you do, people try to charge a premium for it, even though today it's pretty obvious how many compromises were necessary to actually put a decent transformable ST toy out there. All of those compromises really add up to a so-so fighter mode, a pretty terrible Gearwalk mode, and a fairly decent Batroid mode. So really that's the strength of this toy, is you can have some fun posing it in Batroid mode, throw it on the display stand with a knife looking angry, and it's somewhat cute and angry at the same time, so that's neat. Check out anymoon.com for my full review, and as always, thanks for viewing.